Hello, it's Grace Gothic, and I wanted to do a video on Stacey Dash's rebuttal about her opinion on getting rid of Black History Month. I actually really agree with her, and she says that she didn't see the point in having Black History Month. And then in her rebuttal, she said that people aren't thinking about the entire idea, about the entire piece that she said. She says that her point is that blacks deserve so much more. Why do you just want 28 days? You deserve much more than 28 days to think about your history. And she's absolutely right. And actually, that was my initial point as well. There are a lot of points that can be made for this. One point is that your history is something that you're taught as a child, and this information usually comes from your parents. It doesn't necessarily come from your school. You learn your general history in school, and but the most important history that you will learn is your own history, your bloodline history, your lineage history, and that's something that most Black people don't really know, and it's overlooked in favor of people who make it to actual history books, which is a bit odd, because in the rest of the world it's actually reversed. People know about their bloodline, who they're related to, if it's a dynasty, if it's a ruler, if it's a thief, whatever. That's who they're able to trace their direct ancestry. But here in the States, it's a lot different than that. There's a lot of focus on popular or Black scientists, achievers, creators, abolitionists, things like that, people like that, who've made major achievements throughout Black history. However, the average Black person doesn't even know where exactly their bloodline comes from, and that's a lot backwards, actually. So I can understand her making that statement based upon that point. The most important history that you will ever receive is the history of your bloodline, instead of the history of someone whom you're not related to, you'll never meet, who has no relation to you. And if you're trying to match up your human potential is best matched up against someone who's related to you, who's in your bloodline, as opposed to someone whom you've never met and you'll never meet in your lifetime, who has actually no blood relation to you. And that's often overlooked in the U.S. A lot of people say, I'm African, and their bloodlines may or may not actually come from Africa. Black people also, they hold on to other types of names and labels that people give them without actually knowing if it fits, if it's appropriate. You call it Black, Negro, all these different terms, and you accept them. However, you don't have enough self-information and self-knowledge to even dispute what you're being called. So it's like every few years you're given a new name, a new description of what you're being called, and you don't have solid information to say, no, that I'm not this, I'm this, if you understand what I'm saying. So she was right. She just didn't stress the point that that's really, history is really something that needs to come from your parents. That's really the job of your parents. It's not really the job of a grammar school, a university, a program, something like that. It's your responsibility to know where you come from. It really is. And having Black History Month puts a focus on learning your history in a specified point of time. And that doesn't really make any sense. You should be learning your history 365 days a year. And another point that other people made, they said, well, Caucasians, every day is Black History. Every day is History Day for them. Well, why is that? People made the same comment over and over, but nobody really thought about that. That's because they most know their own individual history. They can trace their bloodlines back to different countries, but the average Black person can't. And there's not even a desire to really do that. There's different websites, but there's not really a desire or passion to really trace their bloodline back to see, there's this whole kings and queens argument, but does that argument even stand up? Have you actually traced your bloodline back to see if there's any royalty in your bloodline? Because we can't all be kings and queens. That's not even possible to have millions and billions of queens in one landmass, descendants of so many kings and queens in one landmass. No, it doesn't really work like that. Everyone plays a role on planet Earth, and there has to be a king or queen, a jester. There has to be a guard. There has to be a cook, a chef, an artist. I mean, what role did your parents and did your ancestry play in the role or in the game of life? And that's important that each individual know that. And that was a point that seemed also to be overlooked, is that, there's not enough responsibility being taken. It's not for other people who don't look like you to give you your history or to teach you your history. It's your responsibility, So if they remove Black History Month, are you not going to learn about yourself? Like, what's the point? It really honestly doesn't make any sense, if you really think about it. And it seemed like a lot of people didn't think about it. You just heard the same points regurgitated over and over and over again. Well, when there was so much that, could have been argued, could have been debated tastefully, instead of the name calling and the same points, these people have their history every day without thinking how or why they have their history out there every single day. And no one, really thought, well, hey, these people actually know their history or where they come from. They've actually traced it. They actually, have internalized it. They actually, keep studying up. They are politically savvy. They're geographically savvy. They're anthropologically savvy. They can trace the history, the geography, their bones back. If you're not doing that, then why are you arguing about a Black History Month? It just really doesn't make any sense. There's so much individual work that needs to be done in order for you to have a real identity. And you don't get it from people who just sort of kind of resemble you. That's really not enough, because, if we all come from different parts in the world, you really need to know which place in the world you come from. At least half of it from one part of your parents, at least know something. But just blanketing it and saying, I come from a particular landmass, where there's how many countries on that particular landmass? And are you sure if you actually come from that landmass? You can't really argue about having a month or a history month if you don't even know that, if you don't know your individual history. It's really pointless. And that's something that, I really didn't hear argued. And I don't know if it was a point that Stacey was trying to make, but it's a point that really didn't get made. And that, people really have to take the intellectual responsibility and stop being intellectually lazy and actually do the work and the research to find out who they are, specifically, individually, instead of connecting themselves onto people who may be the same shade as them, but they may not have that much in common with as they do their great-grandparents, their grandparents, and so forth and so forth. So that's the point that I wanted to make, that I didn't really hear from a lot of other people, is that, I think people are stepping too far outside the box when the inside work hasn't been done, literally. So I'm going to end this video, and thank you, comment, and subscribe.